CFPB, there's a piece from the executive order that really speaks to me. It's around designing and delivering services with a focus on the actual experience of the people whom it's meant to serve. And so for us, that may mean internal or external for the American public. And that ultimately we're working to do that equitably and effectively for those who've been historically underserved. So I think that's really, for me, gets at the core of what we're doing with in terms of CX and where that might overlap with user experience, but it's really all about serving those in the greatest need.
Okay. I'll pause there to say if anyone has a question for Adam or Heitham, feel free to drop it in the chat. You can either send it to everyone or just send it to me as a direct message, and I can weave it into the questions that we have already pre-selected. So with that, Heitham, I'll start with you again. Who would you say your external customers are?
We have quite a few. Of course, bank customers are the primary one, especially if they need help. We've got an entire site dedicated to that goal of helpwithmybank.gov. We also have the banks themselves because the guidance that we put out for what they need to do in order to stay in compliance, and anyone who wants to know our approach is accessible at our primary website, occ.gov. Of course, there are citizens that just are generally trying to understand the overall financial services landscape. The fact that there's OCC, FDIC, NCUA, CFPB, the Federal Reserve, there's so many aspects to this that are important to understand. So the general public's trying to understand who's regulating their bank and how are they doing it. We've got Congress, of course, and job seekers, media. So quite a few different stakeholders. Those are probably the same ones most federal government agencies have. The two unique ones would be the bank customers and the bankers themselves in this case.
Okay. And Adam, who would you say your external customers are?
Sure. I think we have kind of three main buckets. The first being American consumers that we're charged to protect. The second being the financial industry. Often we're interfacing with them, whether it be sharing information with them or intaking data from the financial industry. And then also advocates, academics, nonprofits who are looking to understand our regulatory guidance or analyze the data that we release. But ultimately, I think all of that comes back for us to that American consumer. And if we kind of always have that as our focal point and making sure that we're serving the public and that's our goal is to, whatever our service is, to ultimately meet the needs of the public, then I think that's kind of ultimately focuses in on building the greatest experience we can, regardless of who our user is.
Okay. And I'm going to jump into a few of the questions that we're getting here in real time. Heitham, this one is for you from an OCC perspective. So what specific types of tasks can people perform at the OCC's website?
Great question. So we have four public-facing websites. Helpwithmybank.gov. You can look up the common FAQs that people have when interacting with their bank, as well as file a complaint, file an appeal to complaint. So there's very consumer-specific tasks. At our main website, occ.gov, you can look up all of our reports and research. Our search engine is tied to Google Custom Search. We thought it was really powerful in providing great results. So doing search against our knowledge base there. We have a couple of search tools that we're required to provide. Community Reinvestment Act information, all of the reports that the agency generates there, you can search them. All of our enforcement actions are also available for search through the website. More recently, we've tied together the enforcement data, the CRA data, and our institution licensing data, which kind of generally says these are the things that the financial institutions have filed with the OCC. Are they opening and closing branches? Are they merging? Things like that. We've tried to combine all three of those data sets into a single tool called Financial Institution Search, which we call FISH internally. So those are the types of things that we provide mostly on the search side and submission side. On BankNet, that's a portal just for bankers. That one is semi-public. It's our extranet, so it's password protected. And that one serves bankers' needs to collaborate with OCC by sending us files, by processing complaints, by processing licensing transactions for their bank, and other general access to data that would help them be able to make better decisions through BankNet. And our last is careers, where of course people looking for a job or to understand our overall talent strategy can learn more.
Okay. And Heitham, OCC is proving pretty popular here. So I'm gonna, while you're off mute, start with you again. But Adam, I'm gonna pitch this same question to you. Can you talk about some of the challenges and pain points for OCC? And then Adam, I'll punt to you for that same question for CFPB.
Challenges and pain points. So I'm just going to focus on the public side first. Recent challenges and pain points was really figuring out search. We really feel that in order for people to access our search, having really good content that is tagged correctly and appropriately titled and appropriately written in plain language to optimize for search. If you try to Google, I have a problem with my credit card, you are going to end up with so much information that is not from a regulator. You're going to end up from banks, you're going to end up for people who are content aggregators who are just trying to get you to their services. So for us to be able to be credible is really to focus on our SEO so that people can find us in the wide sea of information that's out there. We especially had to do that with help with mybank.gov because that one, we really want consumers to find the government set of information. One of the biggest things that I've seen recently that's a challenge is there's a lot of new technology coming around and that solves a very specific problem. Let's say a tool that's really good as a knowledge base, and all of a sudden that tool is really good. You incorporate it into your overall content ecosystem, and it really takes information out of places that we might have had it like on our intranet, on our public site, and now it's separated from the main content of the rest of your content strategy. And in really integrating the data that is in different systems that have specific purposes, our content management system is a static content management system, as in our sites are static. They're not dynamic, real-time. They're searchable, but they're not an interaction system, whereas the knowledge management systems are. So really bridging the gap between those different types of services so that from a user's perspective, it doesn't matter where they search, they find what they need and they don't get lost in a silo of information. I'd say that's one of the biggest like global needs for us.
Okay, thank you. I think that's very helpful to hear. And so Adam, from a CFPB perspective, what would you say your biggest challenges and pain points are? And feel free to keep it public facing, similar to Heitham.
Yeah, no, that's great. I have to admit, I was so engrossed by Heitham's answer, I had to stop at the end to think about how I might answer the same question, because I think we share a lot of the same pain points that are similar. For us, you know, and speaking to an audience that may be focused on coming in and working closely with federal agencies, it's often balancing new work with operations and maintenance work. So how do we maintain all of the tools that we've built out across our website, all of the content that we've released, as well as continue to roll out new and valuable tools and content and balance that. And I think that's something that we've traditionally struggled with, as often something will kind of go up, and many government agencies may struggle with this. Something goes up on the web and it sort of lives there. And once it's put out in the world, it's there. And so we've been really trying to think about how do we adopt more of a product life cycle with our work, whether it be content or be an application that we're releasing, so that we're really thinking about it through its whole lifespan, not just up to the release and then leave it alone until we have to manage it. So I think that's probably a little bit different than what Heitham struggles with, and what the OCC sees, but it's a similar vein of problem.
Okay. So we've gotten a few questions as the two of you were talking about your pain points and your challenges. Many vendors want to know, how can they best support you? What is the profile of a vendor that you're looking for to help you address some of these challenges and pain points? And Adam, we'll start with you on that question.
Sure. You know, I think for us, it's looking for great partners, organizations that are interested in solving the underlying problems and understanding the underlying problems, and then partnering with the agency to address those. And so that often comes across in really adopting more of a design thinking approach, using modern agile lean processes and working closely with us to do those things. And so often, that's really probably the key thing that I tend to look for when we're speaking with vendors.
Okay, and Heitham, your thoughts on the vendors that you're looking for?
As I mentioned in the introduction, in 2011 is when we first introduced our content management system. We're using Percussion Rhythmics. It was very popular in the from 2005 through 2012 in the federal government. It was very popular. But we've really seen other content management systems pick up, and a lot of other agencies have subsequently done their digital web content strategy. So we're coming at the 10-year mark for our content management system. It really is a time for us to start thinking overall, will the strategy we deployed for the last 10 years be the strategy that'll serve us well 10 years from now? And the answer is maybe, but there's probably some new components to our overall strategy, not just from a technology standpoint, but from a communication standpoint. We put out an RFI just recently. It's still open on Beta SAM, asking the question, what does digital communication look like in 10 years? And what are the skills that and technology that we should have 10 years from now, so that we can really start putting in place some of those components, and we don't end up flat-footed where all the people that were still doing websites by hand and needed to go to a CMS 10 years ago, and we'll probably need to do something else in another 10 years. This concept of a DXP has come out. Gartner stopped calling it the web content management. Now it's a digital experience platform. So really, what does that fully entail, and all the different communication vectors? We're looking for visionaries that really can paint that picture of where it needs to go, so that we can then operationalize that vision within the agency.
So Heitham, that is a great segue to my next question. So if we can stick on the topic of vision, thinking about the leadership of your respective agencies, and as we move to the terms digital transformation, digital experience, customer experience, how has your leadership adapted or evolved towards the concept of human-centered design?
That's a good question. I think everyone knows a good system when they use it, right? It's one of those things. So from adapting to it in their day-to-day life and knowing that our systems could do more because they've experienced it at their Amazon experience, their Google experience. I think most of us intuitively know that our information needs could be more automated, more tailored to us. It's been a slow adoption, I would say, because we, as the web team, have a public-facing aspect to our mission that really drove us from the beginning to be focused on the 508 needs and the task and information needs of users. So we were almost at the forefront of the public's needs and many stakeholders. So that level of pressure really drives the maturity for us to have to do those things. And I feel as a result, we've kept pace with different trends that have come out as it relates to the web. But we really saw that being kind of driven by industry. I remember in 2011, when we went live with our CMS, it was just web content management. Then we said, well, we probably need some search tools, and they need, maybe we'll do those in a .NET custom way. And then let's get a search engine that's its own platform. Then see these frameworks like Bootstrap started coming out. So we said, hey, how can we take advantage of some of these frameworks? And eventually the US web design standards came out, really tying it all together. So this has been slow evolution of these progressions of technology and things that we saw and we wanted to adopt in our overall solution.
Okay, thank you. And Adam, what about the CFPB leadership? What is your perspective on how they've leaned in?
Yeah, I think this has been really exciting. So in late 2021, we had our new director was appointed, Director Chopra. And one of the first things that he did was he brought on the CFPB's first chief technologist, Iri Meyer, who is one of the founding members of USDS. And she has worked with the director and with myself in my office to really build towards how do we incorporate design thinking in all that the organization does. So not just when we build web content, but how are we using these kind of methodologies for policy or for making quick, fast iterative updates. And so we've instituted some processes where our user researchers, our user experience teams, our designers, our developers will be paired with subject matter experts from around the organization, working in short design sprints where we have a broad question that we're looking to iterate on and solve, produce prototypes, and put that in front of real users in a short period of time. And so that's gone a long way to really adopt those practices across the organization. And at first that can be a little resistant to that. It's a lot of change, it's a lot of moving quickly, but we've seen when we've shown tangible outcomes in a short period of time, people get really excited. We're able to show a major change on the website that happens in just a few days and results in an order of magnitude of greater engagement with that page, for example. And those kinds of things that really get the whole organization on board with that type of thinking.
Okay, great. Adam, as a heads up, the next question will come to you. So we'll go from vision to more tactical conversation. So if you think about specific design approaches, best practices, thinking about where you are now, where you want to be, can you kind of take us through that evolution of maybe where you are today and think more tactically in terms of concepts and capabilities and where you want to be in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, a very centralized team. I manage a team of designers and developers that are centralized within our organization. And, that means that we sort of are a bottleneck. And so one thing that we've done tactically is try to expand to more of a center of excellence so that we're sharing user research best practices and conducting trainings and being a resource so that we're not the only ones conducting user research and talking to users across the organization. And so I think the more that we can continue to do that and start to see that everything we do as a regulator is technology-based and the industry we regulate is technology-based, we can sort of spread that thinking organizationally. The other, and I mentioned this in my last answer, is really adopting some of the methodologies that have been popularized outside of government and in parts of government within our organization. So, I mentioned design sprints, and that's something that we've sort of embraced in the last, 6 months, but we're still growing in that. We've experienced our own growing pains in adopting that. So I think that we're trying to institutionalize that. How do we take on some new work? What's the cadence of a design sprint? And how do we, iterate quickly, prototype, and put things in front of users and get feedback in a short period of time? So it's kind of those two dualities. How do we spread our knowledge, but also how do we build out some of our core capabilities as a design organization?
Right. And Heitham, you already, I think, halfway answered this question about where you are today, but is there anything else you would add in terms of either where you are today and your evolution to where you want to be from a tactical perspective?
Yeah, I think some of the things that Adam said are right on. The concept that software is eating the world is a common quote, and everything is a design and a system fundamentally. We found that some of the bread and butter stuff is still something we do, but and when we do it, shows a lot of promise. When we redesigned Help with My Bank, for example, we did that based on user research as our fundamental of what do we need to do to make this the best site it can be, from benchmarking to usability testing, information architecture analysis. We went and looked up all the different ombudsmans across the world to see what were even the color palettes they were using, just to really base our information on as much as we could by looking outwards, and then also speaking with people within the agency. And we went out of our way to even include people that were within the building that maybe weren't at the OCC, that spoke different languages, were more likely to be a customer of a bank, so that we could base the FAQs that we're putting out there. So we operationalized that when we finally the solution. I remember very clearly the executive, when we delivered that of the websites, wow, you really based your final product on research, and it shows. And we had to fight really hard to get that research time. because there was the rush to put new CSS on it and call it a day, and that's always the tension between delivering something that's just slightly better and something that's really based on a user's needs. And that's something, us incorporating that more. We have a small team. Our team is only 15, and we focus on 6 or 7 sites and the search products that I'd mentioned previously. So as Adam mentioned, trying to do new stuff plus run operations for all of the web and content publishing needs of the agency. And that is a really hard thing to balance, while also incorporating in these best practices that focus on the user.
Okay, great. So you've talked a bit, both of you have talked a bit about where you are, where you want to be. I've heard the integration of design sprints, and I can only imagine that there is a huge cultural shift or cultural evolution that needs to happen. Adam, I see you smiling about that part. So Heitham, we'll start with you on this one. Can you talk about the cultural shift that needs to happen with the people? If you want to get into processes and tools as well, we can talk about that as well. But can you take us through the cultural shift that you think has either already happened or will happen as you shift to the future?
What I experienced at our agency at OCC was that Lean Six Sigma was really embedded into the overall organization much earlier than this concept of customer experience. And that really focused on the efficiency of everything. And a lot of our tools and systems were built focused on the speed of it and getting the user what they needed, but really didn't incorporate some of the other practices around speaking with them and their general emotion and feeling and their information needs per se, but it was really focused on just the speed of the thing. Do we save money? Are we cost effective? And those are all very important things. But generally, as an information, our workers are information workers. They thrive on being given the information they need right when they need it. So structuring our systems to deliver that information in a simple way that isn't frustrating and adds value to their day-to-day delivery. As far as the cultural shift, as I mentioned, I think people know when they are using a good system, so people understand what they need. I would say the biggest cultural shift that's really complicated is the tendency to buy a product and just use whatever the product does, but without contextualizing it with everything else that has been thought of in other existing systems or other information needs. So going back to the integration between different systems that really do something well into a cohesive plan around information and user experience.
Okay. And Adam, your thoughts on the cultural shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think Heitham hit the nail on the head in many ways. I feel very fortunate at CFEB, and I'm sure many others feel this way. We have tremendous colleagues, whether it be the technologists, but also our economists and housing experts and community engagement experts. We really have tremendously smart folks. But the systems in place in government often sort of are made in a way that organizational thinking goes along kind of reporting structures or team structures. And so that often leads to work being kind of tossed from one team to another. And though you may work in a more agile way, there's still a waterfall process where something needs to go to another team. And so, in a few of our answers, we talked a little bit about thinking holistically, spreading these kind of ways of thinking across the organization. And I think the more we see that, the more success there has been and the more buy-in there is. And that can happen at a policy level where we have, if policy has to do with data, having data scientists in the room discussing that rather than just our lawyers. But it also goes with what Heitham said in terms of having technology that works across boundaries. So thinking about not just the project that we're delivering, so not just this data collection project, but how do we do data collection as an organization? And are we aligning that and building out systems that enable that rather than building 7 systems that have to be maintained separately to maintain that? So I think those are kind of the cultural challenges, is how do we work collaboratively in a larger organization and kind of have a shared ethos where we're all working towards the same thing.
Okay. So let's switch gears for a little bit and talk about user feedback. So how do you take user feedback from your end users, and how does that influence future work or delivery? And so Adam, I'll just say it one more time. How are you taking user feedback from your end users, and how does that influence future work or delivery?
Sure, I think we do that, or try to do that in a number of ways. We do a lot of user research where we try to engage folks either directly in small user research. We use platforms that let us engage with users. We look closely at our analytics and make decisions based on those. And then we also do things that maybe aren't behind the intent of this question, but we have a robust open source policy where we release all or nearly all of our code as open source. And so we receive feedback at the code level from those. And that can be really interesting, particularly when we're building out systems that are being used and integrated with by industry, where we'll get feedback requests or bug reports from our day-to-day users in the industry. So, we try to incorporate that feedback and then work that into all of the way we work. And just in our processes of working in kind of sprint-based methodology, we're looking at that feedback regularly, integrating it, putting in our backlogs, and working it into the products that we build.
Okay. And Heitham, your thought on taking user feedback and influencing future work or delivery?
Yeah, we're getting feedback from all different angles, and some informal and some formal. If we redesign, then we take time to incorporate in a user interviews, a user journey, and your like typical stuff in there. But we don't have the opportunity because of the team size to be always doing that. That would be like an aspirational goal for us to be able to test and improve our services as we roll them out more frequently than not. But usually what we do is we finish something big and we move on to catching up something that hasn't been redesigned in 3 or 4 years, because now we know it needs a refresh. But we're also, as mentioned, analytics are a big part of it. Because we're working with our content contributors from across the agency every single day, we're getting a lot of feedback that way too, from the people who are the subject matter experts with the content, at least in the form of what their needs are. There's a couple more. For example, we do have mailboxes on some of our locations that we are able to collect feedback. On our BankNet platform, we do have a mailbox as well called Ask OCC. There are a lot of types of questions a bank might ask their regulator. Many of them go to the exam teams, and that's appropriate where they go, or might need to go to legal or the ombudsman. But there are questions that are specific to our technology or the process of using our system. So we are also collecting feedback that way so that we can make sure to address if something's broken, or if there's information that can't be found because we've created some sort of error in how we're delivering that information.
We're getting 2 questions while you were speaking here, Heitham and Adam. So, and I'm going to go backwards, Alina and Scott. So, Alina, what are the main challenges in getting users for feedback, or I assume getting feedback from users? Can you speak about those challenges? And Heitham, I'll start with you.
Okay. That's a good question. When we do our user interviews, we tend to focus on internal staff where it's very clear where that we have access to their time, and we'll go through asking for their time formally. We've rarely done external kind of surveying on our systems. We don't have a survey tool on our public facing sites like 4C, for example. We've purposefully decided not to do it that way. On our intranet, we do have an ability to provide feedback on content. That's a tool we built inside where people can rank in a page for its information quality and then give us feedback. And we go through that daily so that we can make sure that internally that our content is meeting people's needs, because oftentimes those are very time sensitive as far as people's benefits or their training needs. So that one we check daily. Yeah.
And Adam, any challenges from your perspective in terms of getting feedback from the users?
Yeah, we I mentioned this earlier, we really value doing user research and user testing, and we employ platforms that help us with recruitment and things like that. But, those don't fill all of our needs. So I think our biggest is just user recruitment, making sure that those that we're effectively recruiting users quickly, and that that's representative of our user base, so that we're, not, incidentally leaving people out of that process. So making sure that we're really bringing all of the users that we can. So really it's doing that recruitment effort is probably our biggest challenge there.
Okay. Scott, I'm going to go to your question. I may ask you to chime in to elaborate if this question is not straightforward. But Scott in the chat, his question here, are there any opportunities for participatory design practices? And Adam, I will start with you.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think that's something that, we work towards, whether it be doing journey mapping, doing user testing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand on that and really incorporate others in that process. What we do participatory design in that we're have internal stakeholders maybe involved in the design process, and are doing user interviews, user research, and getting feedback. But I think bringing more people into that process would be wonderful.
Okay, and Heitham, your perspective on participatory design practices.
Just say ditto to that one. Most of our participatory design stuff, as I mentioned, has been focused on audiences that we can quickly access. There's a complexity with collecting information from the public and needing to get the appropriate documentation for that type of data collection. But we definitely, when we have access to them where we are in a way that meets all of the compliance needs, we take that opportunity.
Okay. So Heitham, I will direct the next question to you first. So different topic. This is about cross-agency integration, if you will. So the question is, do you have any smart or Google search engines that not just pull information from your own agencies, but also from other federal regulators?
That's a cool question. I actually did create one when we were exploring using Google programmable search or Google custom search, and was fully aware of that because these are all public sites, that there could be a single search for all of the different financial regulators. That being said, the ones that we have on our public sites are solely focused on our specific website. Anyone that's using Google custom search or programmable search, or any public search engine that will let you define your collection, could set up their own. And it's a really good idea, especially if I was an academic or someone who really needed to pay attention to the different data and publications coming from different regulators in the financial services space. It is doable and achievable.
Okay, and Adam, your thoughts on pulling data from other federal regulators?
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting question for a couple of reasons. One, in the executive order on customer experience, it talks about having unified experiences for some of the key life experiences that people may have, retirement or starting a business. In sort of these things often fall between multiple federal agencies. As you all maybe got the sense that to Heitham and I, the difference between our agencies maybe seems crystal clear, but if we were to describe it to someone off the street, they might say, oh, you two sound like you kind of do the same thing in a lot of ways. So I think the more that we can have those unified experiences and offer ways to do that is great. And I think one of the opportunities is less about us building those tools and providing those search engines, and maybe more us providing the data in different formats so that others can integrate that. Something we've toyed with is, how do we release just all of the content on our CMS or all of our sort of FAQ question content as an API, so that anyone can consume it and integrate it with their own systems, so that those unified experiences can be built by others, or that information can be fed into smart platforms that are maybe using AI or something to integrate and learn from that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and that's a space that I think government's just starting to tiptoe into a little bit. And I think platforms like this, where we're all talking about it, having conversations, are where that starts to happen too.
Brandy, if I could add to my answer based on how I was very narrow in talking about search as like a web content search. When I mentioned our financial institution search, which was merging 3 different data sets, that was extremely difficult for us to do that data cleanup between the 3 different systems. Not necessarily because we couldn't find a unique identifier so that we could tie all the data together, but each of the data sets was created by 3 different business units doing different data entry practices. So just the cleanup of all the data to match it all together so that it didn't produce a discombobulating view. And when it's merged together was what took us a long time to do. And then also trying not to show all the data because there was a lot of data. So you really have to pick what's the right entry point for someone so they can kind of tiptoe into this and say, yes, I do want to learn more, and then provide more. So I just wanted to talk about that side. Adam had mentioned something else that piqued my interest. Yeah, I forget. Thanks.
No problem. Yeah, and I wanted to make sure that I read the last part of this question, which is how do you do smart cross-referencing amongst the agencies? And so, Heitham, I think you started to talk about specifically about how that happens. And so, Heitham or Adam, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add from that vantage point.
I'll give a shout out to the FDIC. I mean, their financial institution search is really good. They're not here today, but it's where most people go to really do a financial institution search. The one we've built contains data that we specifically have, and it goes to Adam's point that the ultimate goal is if we were to provide the same data set through an API, then anyone could access it, including them, and the quality of the overall definition of a financial institution could be stronger from their systems and from our systems over time. So 100%. We actually, with our web content management system, built our CMS stores its data in itself the way it wants to store it. But we knew that in order to provide it to someone else that needed to consume it, we needed to simplify the structure of that data and actually do publish all our content as data into a data schema so that our custom tools like our search, our newsroom is pulling right from that. And what we also found is that as information analysts ourselves building new products and services, we needed access to the CMS data as far as a metadata system so frequently. How many things do I have that are about this topic? Someone needs to reorg, so we need to delete this information. Let's pull the inventory, let's pull the analytics, mash them up, and then start really making decisions about how long it's going to take to clean this up. And that happens all the time. I would say if the one thing that's not understood operationally about how hard it is to keep information clean when it's in a CMS because of how much organizations change, it's such a important task within the agency to keep up with that data.
Okay. I'm looking at the clock here. We only have a few minutes left, but related to that, and Adam, I'll start with you for this question. While we're on the topic of data, thinking about other data stakeholders, so such as NARA or ECFR, can you talk about how you integrate or collaborate with those other data stakeholders?
Yeah, sure. I think that's such a great and interesting question, largely because there's not a great answer to it, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space. You know, for us, the ECFR, for anyone's unfamiliar with it, is where the Code of Federal Regulations, so all of the regulations by the government are published in a digital format. Right now, you know, the process of that looks like Word documents or PDFs being sent to the ECFR and then publishing it. I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow in that space. The ECFR does a great job. They put that content out as an API. They've worked to modernize what that looks like. But certainly that's just putting the content out there. It doesn't aid in the analysis of the content, what rules apply to whom. Often in the case of financial regulation, you're responsible to multiple regulators. You're not regulated only by the CFPB, you're regulated by OCC and FDIC and others. And so multiple rules and multiple even rules across agencies may apply. So I think there's opportunity similar to the last question where we can better enable the understanding of that, maybe, I don't want to give solutions here, but things like enabling tagging of what rules cover, or providing definitions in line with the text itself, or often agencies provide guidance material that's published on their own website, but is not published on the ECFR. So integrating that guidance material in a standard way so that it can be seen in line with the regulatory text. I think that's a space that is ripe for greater participation. It's something that you probably all can tell I feel really passionate about, because I think it has a huge potential for impact across government and for people. But I think it's somewhere that we're tiptoeing into. The UK has done this a little bit with a few of their rule books, and I think it's something that the United States could start to adopt as well.
Okay, and Heitham, your thoughts on integrating with other data stakeholders?
We take all our web records by the definition of what is a web record and publish it to our records management system. So, and then that the records management team is able to handle the handoff to NARA and dispose of it appropriately. That was a really important automation, because it allowed us to just define, if we provide the right context and metadata of the type of document it is, and we're able to then at a nightly basis send that information directly to our records team.
Okay, perfect. One last question. Adam, this question is specifically for you and CFPB. The question reads, today's constituents engage with the government across a variety of communication systems. So how does CFPB use public, i.e. social media, and private, i.e. census data, to build better customer engagement platforms?
That is such an interesting question. I think that the key here, and this is something we've touched on in a few answers, is for us to focus on the things that are unique services the CFPB can provide. So we're never going to be able to, from a financial education standpoint, compete with a website or a large company that's pushing out financial education material. We can put out some unbiased material and make sure that we're providing that. But how are we doing that in a way that's unique to the information we can provide? One of the most accessed tools on our website right now is how to find rental housing assistance for those in need because of the COVID pandemic. That's data that we have unique access to, information that we're able to work with partners at the Treasury and a nonprofit organization to gather and collect that information and distribute that. So I think for us, it's really focusing on where do those things intersect and what's the unique value that we can provide. And those are the places that we can really, give a lot of support and provide things that people can use and engage with.
Okay, perfect. I will stop the questions there. For anyone that has a pressing question and want to circle back, feel free to shoot Ken or I a message, and we'll see if we can get that answered for you. Heitham, I'm going to open up the floor. I do not have a question for you, but any last parting words for today?
Just like to thank you, Brandy, thank you, Ken, thank you, Adam, and for anyone who stayed through to the end to hear about our needs and our strategies. I appreciate the time to speak here today.
Perfect, Heitham. And Adam, any parting words for our audience today?
I'd like to echo that. Thanks. I appreciate Brandy, you hosting this panel, Heitham participating, Ken for organizing, and all of you for viewing this. It's exciting. To me, these topics are really exciting because it's how we help the American people. And I think, it's great to see a number of folks also engaged in that.
For sure. Well, with that, thank you everyone for attending. We are really excited to have you join with us today. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ken.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for this webinar. We do have a post-event poll, so before you leave, please fill it out, as it'll help our programming for future events. And yeah, huge thank you for Adam and Heitham for all their time, Brandy for doing outstanding moderation. So sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions. It looked like we could go a lot longer. So, but we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again. Make sure you fill out the survey.